Okay, boom. And we are live. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to a very special edition of Off the Record on the People's Podcast this evening. This is a late show tonight, and we know that everybody's so excited to tune in for the one and only Brother Athil Muhammad, who's going to give us some amazing information as well as inspiration. First of all, assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum salam, sir, and wa alaikum salam to you, and assalamu alaikum to your viewers as well. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Now, this is a very I had there was some trepidation with me asking you to come on the show because I know you deal with real life law and jurisprudence and so much more important stuff in the world. However, this is one of the trials of the century in pop culture, and everybody's discussing it. So I said we got to talk about it on the People's Podcast. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come, give us some understanding. The
You're quite
first
welcome,
question.
sir. You're quite
Yes, sir.
welcome.
My sister Mary Mimi, as you say, Sister Giggles says, "Assalamu alaikum, walaikum salam,
Princess
Mimi."
Giggles, please, yes, yes, please return the greetings to my princess and hugs and kisses.
Praise be to Allah. Okay, so the first thing we want to know, sir, is the jury selection. Could you break it down for us who are watching? How did they choose? Is there a gender, race? How was it done? And yeah, let us know, please, sir.
Well, generally speaking, when you select the jury or when a jury is selected, that might be the better way to term it.
Yes, sir.
As I always tell people, it's a numbers game. And what happens is the prospective jurors are seated, let's say from 1 to 10, 1 to 20, 1 to 30, whatever the situation might be. And depending upon everything goes, sometimes a prospective juror, sometimes everyone is in, say, the whole jury pool is there in the courtroom and they're interviewed, for lack of a better term, or questioned. The French word is voir dire, but they're questioned, in order sometimes to determine, who will, sit, who will eventually become make up the jury. And so, in some cases, though, that individual jurors still by number, when you get into the jury room there, you're numbered, you get a number one, two, three, whatever the situation might be. And sometimes then that they are questioned individually by the judge and then the attorneys. And so you don't know, in that regard, other jurors don't know, who or what the questions were. So what happens is you don't really know initially, if it's going to be a woman or man, what the ethnicity is. Um, that's determined. Well, the attorneys know because they'll already see in the juror questionnaire, if it's a man or woman, what the ethnicity is. But they don't get to choose, I want number one to be a woman, I want number two to be a man, what have you.
Mm, mm,
That is
mm.
already predetermined. But the attorney would know when he or she gets the questionnaire, they will know, the first one is a woman, the second one is a man, whatever the situation might be. Now, um, you have what's called a peremptory strike and a challenge or peremptory challenge and a challenge for cause. Now that means that peremptory is you don't have to necessarily give, the attorneys don't necessarily have to give a reason for not wanting that person on the jury. I'm making it real simple, you know.
Okay, okay.
And so, if I say, okay, well, juror number one, I don't want her because for whatever reason, and the reason might be that I think that she might, you know, be, favorable or unfavorable rather to my theory of the case. Well, but that might not be a reason, a justified legal reason. So I may say, okay, well, I want to use a peremptory strike, to get rid of that person. Now,
Mm,
a strike for cause would be a legal basis. In other words, that the person, based upon that prospective juror's answers to questions, let's say, for instance, he or she cannot follow the law. He or she um, has already determined guilt or innocence. And I say that because obviously this is a criminal accusation, but it also applies in civil matters as well.
Okay. Okay.
But the person in a criminal accusation, of course, has the presumption of innocence until proved guilty. But the legal thing then would be that this person, based on his or her responses to our queries, has determined that, or it has been determined that, hey, I don't think this person, can follow the law. And so that would be then a strike for cause. Then what happens is you, on both sides, give their peremptory strikes or the persons that they don't want on the jury to the judge or to the clerk, rather, as well as the strikes for cause. And the remaining numbers are the ones who were seated on the jury. And so um, you will have, let's say, 12, and sometimes you'll have two alternates. Now, if you have situations where you have, 12 jurors and two alternates, you really don't know who the alternates will be. They don't know who that they might be alternates until the trial is over. In other words, until both sides rest or testimony and evidence is rested. Then, when they begin, when they get the jury instruction, when the judge gives them the charge or the instruction, on the law of what they're supposed to consider, then the alternate or the persons then are found, okay, hey, I'm actually an alternate, not be allowed to be in the deliberation room, for lack of a better term. But they would, of course, sit for the entire trial. And the alternates are there, of course, because a juror can get sick, and you don't want to have to go through the entire process again. So let's suppose, I'm there and I get sick. Well, somebody now has to take my place. That would be considered an alternate juror.
Hmm.
Now, that alternate juror has already been there from day one, listening to everything, forming his or her opinion. Now I get sick. Now that person it becomes not an alternate, but then a regular juror, because you don't want to, let's say if I get sick and I'm a juror, you don't want to have to start the process all over again. So that's generally, that's where, you would have your jurors and then generally your two alternates. And I say, it's, that also is a misnomer when we say jury selection. It's not that you say, okay, you kind of, it's an interesting or backwards way. You sort of weed out persons who are prospective jurors. In other words, because it's a numbers game, that you don't get to say, okay, I want number one, two, three, four. That doesn't work necessarily work like that. Jurors or potential jurors, for the most part, they are eliminated from jury service on a particular trial or something, as opposed to selected. And I know that's a little play on words. Sometimes people might look at it as semantics, but it's a little bit different, when you go through the process and knowing that, that, hey, I'm selecting a jury. We all, even lawyers, use that phrase,
Hmm.
and I look at it, and sometimes I say, if you're, let's say, in a case, and you're dealing with a trial, and you're getting ready for that jury process, and let's say if I'm a prospective juror and my number is, let's say, 40, and let's say it's a misdemeanor case, which only have, and I know this is not P. Diddy's case is not a misdemeanor, but I know, for instance, if there's a misdemeanor case and I know that there are only going to be 6 jurors, and let's say I have juror number, and I'm a prospective juror, and I'm number 35. Well, I know for the most part I'm not going to be on that jury because they're not going to get all the way to me. And as an attorney, for instance, that you have a number of peremptory strikes and a number of strikes for cause, and then you have 6 jurors. So both sides, I didn't look with a misdemeanor. So both sides have, let's say, those strikes. So for the most part, you just do the math. 6 are going to have to sit. And so, 3 people, I have 3 people I can get rid of. And the other side has 3 people. So that's 6 and 6, that's 12. You figure then that you want to talk, let's say, and do your, voir dire or your inquiries of jurors to the first, limit them to the first, let's say maybe 15 at or 20 at most. So if a person is a selected for jury service, and depending upon where you are now, because I know, for instance, down here in Texas, that's how it goes. But if you are selected for jury service and you're number 30, well, you figure for the most part, if it's a misdemeanor, I'm not going to be on that jury. Now, if you're number 30 and it's a felony matter where they have 12 jurors, or even if it's a federal matter, and depending upon the stakes, you're 30, you may be there for a minute or two,
mm, mm, mm,
but
mm,
but um but it's a fascinating process, I think, and you're trying to drill down to ascertain people's prejudices, because we all have them, um, likes and dislikes, and you're trying to really ascertain as best you can how this person will view evidence, testimony, and, you know, will that person bring his or her personal experiences into the jury room, into the deliberation room? And, you kind of try to weed this stuff out. That's why, as I understand, some of the jury questions, the questionnaire dealt with P. Diddy's trial was, how many of the jurors, were exposed to media, information on this case. Because again, you know, with the media, going on, it's all in the news, it's all on all of these different social media outlets. It's darn near impossible, and I say darn near, not completely impossible, but darn near impossible, that somebody has not at least heard something, you know. And so when and those questions are being asked of the prospective jurors, okay, what have you heard? And I'm pretty sure some of the attorneys may have asked, has what you have heard, has that formed your opinion as to guilt or innocence of him? And a lot of times, people, if you want to be on the jury, you're going to, say, no, it hasn't formed my opinion, because you want to be on the jury. Now,
mm,
people who say, yes, it has, well, hey, I don't want that person. And that would be an example of a strike for cause. Because what happens is, if I'm honest and I say that I have formed an opinion one way or another, then how that then becomes then a strike for cause, because the thought is that I cannot, as a juror, follow the law. In other words, the law is that the person, let's say it's in a criminal accusation, has the presumption of innocence. Now, before the trial has begun, in this scenario, I've already formed an opinion. Now, I cannot follow the law, because the law states that I have to give this person, the presumption of innocence, and I've already formed an opinion. Therefore, by just look at it, that I now cannot follow the law. Therefore, then I am excused for cause, and that's how that goes.
excellent breakdown. Thank you, brother attorney, brother Athil, and so many people are watching. Alaikum salam, Sister Naima, Sister Adrian, Excess People Podcast, The Enemies Public with Brother Nasir. Thank you very much, Brother Nasir, showing love. So he said, our esteemed guest. People are tapping in. Thank you all for watching Late Night with the People's Podcast with our great guest attorney, Brother Athil Muhammad. The next question we have for you, sir, is the video that was shown on TMZ of Diddy in the hotel went viral. Everybody saw this, months before. Kent, in your opinion, expert opinion, do you think that whether they say they saw it or not, does that affect the people who are watching? I mean, the people on the jury. Do you think that that video alone has swayed people?
I think it's impossible not to.
Mm,
You know, it certainly, it would have, because again, when people see things, we're emotional, and, for good or bad. And so, sure, that's going to sway people. Now, whether or not it should, well, that's a different story,
mm,
but it certainly would. Because, see, as I understand, his attorneys have made the argument that, the domestic violence issue is one thing. And so if he was charged with domestic violence, that certainly, in fact, that's even seeing that video, if the video is even shown at trial,
Mm,
well, that's evidence that is relevant to a domestic violence issue or charge. Now, as I understand, though, his attorneys have argued, and I agree with, that is not sex trafficking. Those are
mm,
two different things. Now, um, the fact, though, that it has been on the news, that's one thing. And this is where I was getting what I was meaning also before, and how you can tie this in. What, as prospective jurors, what media information, what news have you been exposed to? Now, we won't see, or we may not see, if I'm his attorneys, I'm going to, argue that that video has absolutely nothing to do with the trial. So that should not be looked at as evidence in the trial. However, people have already seen it on the news. And so, as you were saying, yes, it will certainly go to, and it plays on people's minds and their emotions, of course. Whether it's relevant to the charges he's facing, it's not. But the cat's already out the bag. The
mm,
problem is the cat's already out the bag, not in the trial, but in all of this pretrial hype, of which is impossible to be able to keep away from. The court cannot have a gag order on, the media, that, you cannot show, these things that have happened all before trial. The problem is that, and this is where it goes back then to the jury selection, seeing something like that, has that swayed? And this is a question that I would ask, whether I'm a U.S. attorney, or representing him, how has, have you seen that video? Has that video affected your way of thinking? And whether or not you looking at this video, has that in any way shape your opinion? And if you say it has, then we go back again to the getting, excusing this person for cause, because the argument can be made, this person, this potential juror, has already formed an opinion, which the law, suggests that an opinion, should not have been formed when you're going to, and you're deciding somebody's fate as a juror.
excellent. Thank you. And thank you all who are watching. Okay. Now, can that work for the prosecution with selecting or eliminating the juror, where because they came up in the 80s, the 90s, they Mary J. Blige, Jodeci, they watched Diddy from Puff Daddy to all where they feel he's presumed innocent. Can that how do you avoid that? If you're with the jury selection.
I'm not understanding. You said, how do you avoid?
Well, where people feel like he's innocent because they watched him for 20, 30
Oh,
years on MTV.
okay.
If you're picking, what I'm saying, it's like he's bigger than life. So do you think this it can work in the
Oh,
opposite
no
way?
question. Right, no question about it. And that's where the U.S. attorneys, because they also have the opportunity to do the same thing, challenge a prospective juror for cause, and, exercise their peremptory challenges. Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about that. You know, and I say this also, Brother Joshua, that, you know, it's impossible, I think,
Okay.
for people to have not formed an opinion. It's it really is, because again, we bring that, if he sometimes, and I've never met him, um, but some people, have grown up on his music, listening to his music, and
Yes, sir.
and people would think, okay, and you have some people would think that it's a witch hunt. Some other people would think, all different things. So we bring all of that stuff to. So there's no question that also, is something that the U.S. attorneys deal with as well, and his image. and just I was talking to a friend just before we began the podcast, and interestingly enough, she was talking about the P. Diddy case, and I was telling her, we don't know these people, so we know what we see. We know, how, like it just, if people are married, they seem like they were the happiest couple, but we don't know. Oh, these people, and so we're now getting another glimpse. But some people, as I say sometimes, there are none so blind than those who refuse to see. Sometimes
Mm.
we are so blinded by whatever it is, our prejudices that, hey, there's no way that we're going to, do this or find this person guilty, or there's no way we're going to find this person not guilty, you know. And so, regardless, so yes, it does work both ways, you know. It certainly does, and for good or bad, in truth, in my opinion.
Excellent, beautiful. Thank you for your breakdown, Attorney with Phil. Sister Liesl is watching. Hey, so like Sister Liesl, thank you for showing love and watching live, holding it down. Okay, our next question for you, sir, is the cameras in the courtroom. So, my mother, who you were very good friends with, her and my grandmother, when we would get off the bus coming to school, court TV was on. It was going to be some Nancy Grace. It was going to be something. I'm like, Mama, y'all, how many celebrity trials is going to be on in the house? It was always something. It was a big deal. Whether it was the OJ case or, man, it was always something. It was a case going on, Bill Clinton. There was something going on in the house. With the Diddy trial, how come aren't cameras? And is that, could you break it down like with the cameras? How come we can't see in the courtroom?
Sure. Well, that's usually up to the judge, but most federal trials are not. Cameras are not allowed in. The judges, make that determination. Now, some of your viewers are a bit too young to remember, but let's say the O.J. Simpson trial. Now, that was a state case. The state of
Mm,
California brought that, or the people of California, I believe is how they term it out there. They brought that case, and Judge Ito, I believe was his name, allowed cameras in. It is up to the judge's discretion, but for the most part, in the federal system, because this is a federal trials, for the most part, you don't have cameras in. Now, of course, you have your cameras outside the courtroom, and you do have your sketch artists. I remember when I was on these death penalty cases, some about 20 years ago now, 18, 20 years ago. There was a sketch artist who was very, very good, by the way.
mm,
She
mm, mm.
captured me a couple of times, and I still have it, so I make sure that I keep it. But yeah, and now you do have your sketch artists, and of course you do have your reporters in the courtroom. So I don't know how quickly they could take shorthand and stuff, but now I don't know about recorders, audio recorders, that I don't know. But cameras, certainly in federal court, in trial, is you're not allowed. The judges, for the most part, that they say no, we don't want our cameras in it. But and I don't know about recorders. I've never taken a recording in, or recorder in, rather. But of course, reporters are allowed, and they can take as many notes as they deem necessary.
Powerful. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's watching. Alaikum salam, Sister Sarah. Thank you to Sister Auntie, Sister Hope, Sister Miriam, Sister Naima, Brother Duke, Brother Kente, everybody who's always watching live, Brother Musa. Thank you to Brother Musa who's always watching as well. We also would like to know, sir, the family. So uh, on Cassie's side, she comes in, she has her husband, they walk in and everybody's in the courtroom. Then you have on Diddy's side, the children, his mother, and they're all coming in. Do you think that's a good look when you see the family members there, or should the family not be there? What are your thoughts on that?
Now, it depends. That you want, as I do things, when I'm representing, anyone, if I'm representing somebody who's accused of a crime, a parole violation, representing somebody who has been, civil matter, that they've been, a victim of police brutality, whatever the situation is, I always want to humanize. the person that I'm representing. And, you know, I want to show that the person has support of his or her family. Now, I always think it's a good thing because, especially if it's a criminal accusation, a parole violation, probation violation, that the person has support of loved ones, support of family. However, you know, the that can also be turned that, let's say, a prospective a juror may look at it as it being something that's staged.
Mm,
Okay, that hey, that this person, oh, he only, has his family here, wanting to show, impress upon me as a juror that he's a family person or she's a family person. So sometimes it can work, you know, an opposite way. But I am always of the opinion that we, at least I do, making sure that the person that I am representing, again, no matter if it's a criminal allegation or accusation, or if it's a, civil rights violation, whatever the situation might be, that this is a human being and who has support and love just like we all do or should. And
mm,
so, you know, and it even goes to, if we listen carefully a lot of times, how the attorneys, how the judges will refer, especially now in a criminal accusation, to the person accused. I try to make it a habit to call the person I'm representing by their name, Mr. So and so, Ms. So and so, and sometimes, and I don't, if people read transcripts of hearings that I have had, trials that I have had, even things that may not, be transcribed in court, I refer to people for the most part as brother or sister. I just do.
mm.
I'll say, brother, come on up, and that's just the way that I am. And so, but one thing I try my best never to do is refer to the person that I'm representing as my client,
Okay.
because in that regard, if I call this person, Mr., Jones, Ms. Jones, then I'm trying to portray not only to a juror, but even to myself, hey, this is a human being. But now, if you listen and in these, court proceedings, you know, you will have people say, will the defendant rise? Or,
Mm,
especially the prosecuting attorneys, whether they are state or U.S. attorneys in federal system, they will invariably refer to the person as the defendant, whether it's, man or woman. But I make sure that I refer to them not as my client, but by their name. And so, again, because I want to make sure that they are portrayed as humans who have love and support. And so, the his family members who are there, her family members that are there, you know, again, it's the love and support to play on the emotions of the jurors. But I would hope that that is not the main reason that they're doing it, because if it is, then it just becomes a show. And so
okay.
anytime that I have that, you know, that I couldn't care less of what the jurors think, you know, I want to just know that, hey, this person, when I say I couldn't care less what the jurors think, meaning to the point of they think I'm doing it because it's staged. That's what I mean.
Yes, sir. Yes,
I
sir.
want them to care that I view this person as a human being who has love and support. And so, if I'm a juror now and I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, well, if I don't see the person who is accused, let's say in his situation, well, where's his family? They don't even support him. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So now I want to know where the family is. And if I see the family, I'm not going to look at it as something staged. I'm going to look at it as, hey, he has the love and support of his family. And she has
Okay.
the love and support of her family because, as a witness. I don't want to take any shine away from her either.
Excellent. Beautiful, Brother Athil. People were bearing witness. Um, wow, Brother Audio Nasur, we haven't seen you in a minute. Walaikum salam, sir. Shout out from Baltimore. Thanks for sharing good information and inspiration. Brother Hamza, Walaikum salam. Thank you for watching, Brother Hamza. We missing you, Brother Hamza. BSA family, please and guests. Um, blessings to the host and guests. A sketch artists are good at speed drawing. Artists quickly did him and gave him the drawing. Also, good talent to have. Beautiful. And I hope you beat your case, brother, or you might be an attorney. I don't know. Okay, yes, sir. The next question we have is the elephant in the room, the race car. Is so what we'll be seeing, what I see the most is if Hugh Hefner got away, or Elvis got away, or if this person got away from a different race, then a black man should get off. Do you think the race is how do you handle that as an attorney? Do you see it as the racial situation, or help us understand it?
Well, brother, I think race plays an enormous part in everyday life and particularly in law. See, you know, whether or not it should, and that as you see that people see the with the lady of justice, with the blindfold on and everything, you know, it's and so that gives the thought that race, that we should not. I mean, and it not only goes with race, but there's a lot of other symbolisms along with that. Um, now when we say about Hugh Hefner, if he had, you got to look at it too. Now it was a different time, and
Mm-hmm.
so with the social media being blowing up and everything, you can see more stuff now that was not seen when Hugh Hefner was on the scene, so to say. So, there weren't all of these news and media outlets. And so, you didn't know, let's say, if he was accused of something. But that being said, um, it's a tough thing because you would hope that it's not, but it certainly is, Josh. And one
Mm.
of the key things is, and see, this is how, race really, in my opinion, I mean, there have been thousands of, probably millions of trials and everything that have gone on, but the one trial that comes to mind, well, two, I beg your pardon, that come to mind is when the persons who beat Rodney King back in the
Mm.
90s, that was
Mm. Mm.
racially motivated and, and those with the officers. But the one thing, the other trial that comes to mind that, really focused on race was the O.J. Simpson trial.
Okay. Okay.
And so, you know, and there was, and I remember Fox, I don't know if it was the Fox News or the television station, whatever, or their cable, FX, whatever it was. They had a movie or series or, a short miniseries, whatever, a few years ago on the O.J. Simpson trial. And I think within about 2 weeks or so, it may have been my memory, I may not remember exactly when, but then ESPN had one. And there's ESPN's was entitled, I think, OJ Made in America.
Okay. Okay.
And theirs was a 4 or 5 part series. And I watched some of the one on FX, which was more of a movie. That was a little different. But then when I watched the one on ESPN, brother, that was excellent. And it
Okay.
showed that how race played such a major, major part in the minds of the jurors. So that I remember one of the things, they were showing clips of, the racial tension in Los Angeles that had been built up for decades. And this now was one, the O.J. Simpson trial was one where a black person, hey, we're going to vindicate this brother, and so race definitely played. I mean, it was a huge part. We all know that.
Yes,
And
sir.
just like the Honorable Minister Lord Farrakhan has instructed, race, we live in this racist society. And so, as I was saying, to people, we come to the table with prejudices. We come to the table even with racial prejudices, racial biases. And so, whether or not, let's say, Hugh Hefner, let's say if you fast forward, let's say putting Hugh Hefner in 2025,
Yes, sir.
um, with the media stuff, it's always one of those things that you just don't know, how to play out. But I just believe in my heart. And the emotional part of me would say, if it was Hugh Hefner, no, this would not be that big a deal. And I'm not trying to, make it seem, like cheapening it, but I just don't believe it would be, that huge. I just don't. Now, I have no statistics or anything to back it up, but here's where it gets a little bit, where the race thing gets a little, tricky. And I was, this is a different trial, but the issue that the officers were acquitted in last week in the beating and the death of that brother in Memphis.
Exactly.
Now,
Okay.
this is
Okay.
where, brother, I said, as I understood, it was an all-white jury.
Mm.
The officers who were on trial were black.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The victim was black. They were acquitted on the state charges.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So, we can make the argument, which would be plausible, that it was a brother who lost his life. So who cares about him? I'm straight up, he's just a nigger. That's the way that we look at it sometimes. But then the persons who accused of committing the crime were black.
Mm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
now that, so we can look at it, or it can be looked at as, the victim being black, that we, stood no chance of justice for that brother, as far as in the state, trial there.
Yes, sir.
But then you look at the persons who are, alleged perpetrators were black. Certainly, in my opinion, if the perpetrators were white, I don't even think it would have gone to trial. Because I just don't think, I mean, because I don't even think they would have been indicted. But that's
Mm.
a whole other, thing, getting into the grand jury system and the different things, which would probably be for another podcast. I'm saying, Josh, another podcast.
Of course. Anytime,
but
brother.
but again, I just believe race does play a huge part, and has played a part in this one as well. Look at Bill Cosby. You know, um, you know, if Bill Cosby was white, would those charges have been brought up in the state of Pennsylvania?
Okay, brother, can we stay right here? We
Sure.
thank you. Everybody showing love. Thank you, brother Ian. We in here. Let's get those likes up. Thank you all. Um, Diploma in Police Foundation and with Law and Security 30 plus years. Hey, okay, go ahead, brother. Representing for 30 plus years. Wonderful. I wanted to ask you, sir, the difference that I see is, do you think that the community doesn't think Cassie as a black woman? Because wouldn't it be like racial if she was like white or something? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like a black woman victim situation. So do you think that changes it? That's all I'm saying. Like, do you think that changes it? Like, because it's like a black woman.
Well, see, now this is not that again, because race plays such a huge part that, and I'm not saying it's that I agree with it at all, what I'm about to say. Some people may say, if it's a black woman, if we view her as a black woman, you know, she, got what she deserved, because just the way that the perception sometimes, that particularly white people have of us. Well, but if she was white, oh no, how could they do this to her? So even that comes in. I mean, it's so much. I mean, it'd be a beautiful thing sometimes, that if we didn't know, if people were able to, be have a trial and everything with, blindfolds and, the victims, their identity, is or ethnicity rather is not known. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And so even that it plays in again our mores and our values and our morals come in,
Yes, sir.
again our prejudices. It's like I remember again some of your viewers, brother, may be a bit too young, but the back in I remember some years ago with the Duke lacrosse players, they
Of
were
course.
accused of
Yes, sir.
of raping and sexually assaulting this young black sister who I think she'd gone to North Carolina Central or A&T, whatever school she had gone to in North Carolina, and she was black, they were white, they were on the right, I just said the Duke lacrosse team.
Yes, sir.
So the thing was then that she's black, we ain't got no rights. Who
Mm.
cares? If I subscribe to that theory, you know, and most people do, most white people is was what I'm going to say. And so we have no rights. And so what rights do we have to, to respect? But now if the victim was white, if it's on the other side there, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now the narrative changes a bit. you know so yes, I certainly believe that that's in people's minds, and that's a difficult thing to overcome, because as an attorney representing somebody who's accused of a crime, that those are some of the things, those prejudices, those things that you're going to have to overcome. And how do you do that? you know, how do you get into the mind of somebody who's going to ultimately decide this person's fate? You know, and just plays a huge part in it because, again, it shapes, in my opinion, how we think, what we do. You know, it just does.
Yes, sir. Beautiful. We have so many more comments and questions. Thank you to everybody who's watching. I just want to say right there, the sister from Duke was found that she was lying, correct? That she was lying on the 30 for 30, right? That she did get found that
I
she was.
did, I did, see that it come across, and I didn't read the story, so I
Oh
don't
yeah,
know.
you gotta watch the 30 for 30 documentary on it. It was real good. Real
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The Black Panthers was down there. It was a big deal. It was a big deal.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. But I wanted to say in every case the points that we're making, the OJ, black and white, Bill Cosby, black and white, the you said another case. Oh, Rodney King, black and white. But in this particular case, I'm saying it's black on black. So I'm saying, what do you think? Like the black people, like the black jurors, like from the comments that I'm reading, a lot of it's not so much racist. It's more black people being like Diddy's our man versus her as if she's not our. That's what I'm saying. It's like, how does that come into play? Whereas in the same race, I'm like, I don't know. I don't necessarily feel that people are like she's a sister girl or she's black enough. I'm not getting that from the comments. I'm not reading. How do you handle that if you're that's you like? I don't think the black community is
Well,
necessarily saying she's a black sister, if you will.
it goes back to I guess how you were talking about it before, that if I'm a fan of his,
Okay.
and I'm not trying to be pejorative, when I say this, but if I'm a fan of his, or her, person can do no wrong.
Mm,
And so, you know, it's so much there. I mean, that because I understand that narrative as well. That sometimes we would have a tendency, or people might have a tendency to, to make her out to be okay. Well, she, how dare she do this? She's supposed to be a sister down, whatever. I understand that too. And so it becomes a fine line that you have to walk or toe, when you're dealing with this. And again, it's prejudices, it's values, it's what we, have come to, believe, and that has shaped our, thoughts. And so you can read comments, but then I guess that there's another side, that would say, well, how dare he do this to a sister? So it's one of the things you're spinning around and you're saying, Dag, okay, well, who is it that I believe? It's like I say sometimes too, brother, or one of my mentors in the, down here, he always would say this to me. There are three sides to every story. There's
Mm.
my side, his side, and somewhere in the middle is the truth.
Yes,
And
sir.
so
Yes,
the
sir.
thing is, as I say to people too, you know, if you really want to get, a good idea of, of a current event, you know, look, let's say, at a Fox News broadcast that might be an extreme, the right. Then look at, let's say, with like MSNBC, or,
Okay. Okay.
that might be to the left, and then form your own opinion, because the far right may not be correct. The far left may not be correct. So why don't you just, try to look at both of them and then form your own opinion? Because far too often, the media and what we look at shapes our arguments and shapes the way that we will, look at things. Now, and again, that's what I'm talking about, going back again to when I talk about, experiences, and prejudices. This is all, all of these things are shaped. So now, if I'm a fan of his, he can do, that, he could do no wrong. If I'm a fan of hers, she can do no wrong. But how do you reconcile that? To know, and this whole thing again, and the legal part would be, that the sex trafficking issue. And see,
Mm,
and
mm.
that's where, is I'm understanding, his lawyers are really focusing on, which they should, because that's the accusation, you know, that the domestic violence is not sex trafficking. And his legal team, I think, has really got to continue to focus on that. Um, and continue, because again, that's the allegation. I don't believe that he has been charged with a domestic violence issue. In fact, if he, that's a state issue. But they have got to, now that whole thing, though, they're trying to besmirch his character, and portray, when I say they, the U.S. attorney, because that's their job. But you do all of those things. So because, even if he winds up not taking the witness stand, um, uh, his character is already out there, is already, been seen, the way in which, the testimony is going and everything. Yes.
Okay, great. Right there, we got some people. Thank you all for watching. Please let us know your comments. Thank you, Brother Houston, always showing love, and everybody who's in the comments as well. We got some great follow-up questions. We have a brief 60-second commercial break for all of the sponsors of the People's Podcast. We are grateful for every like, share, and subscription. Thank you all to every anonymous cash app, every super chat. Um, People in the comments are saying how we got 7 weeks left to the U.S. attorney to prove their case. This is going to be good. Everybody's getting their popcorn ready, so so right there, there's more reason for you to keep coming back. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Hold on
Well, I
1 second.
appreciate you having me, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
1 second. Here we go. Boom. Boom, boom, boom. And we can't wait to get some advice about Brother Athil on so many important topics, including the Cowboys and the Lakers. Hold on 1 second. We're coming right back to the Diddy situation. Here we go. And we are live with the People's Podcast. Street Premier Media Production. He has a 4K camera and a drone. He does television and film editing. Please reach out if you need any of that. Sister Naima, Stay On Point Dance Academy. She teaches ballet virtually to young girls all across the country. Sister Miriam, ABC I Love Me children's book and coloring book. My father's book, A Soldier in the Movement of Christ. My two books, Cleopatra, which is a children's book, and No Father, No Excuse, both of which are available on Amazon. Okay, perfect. Boom. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you all for your comments and your questions. Please continue to show love to the People's Podcast. All right, yes, sir. I wanted to ask you about, oh, in this, once again, from film, television, Love and Law and Order, Matlock, Perry Mason, all of the great, shows. How in a case this big, how do you think they're hiding who the jurors are, like from people chasing them around and stuff? How is that done? Like, how is that done?
What do you mean? How
Like,
do
how
they
do we not know who
hide?
the jurors are? Yes, sir. Like, how do we not know who the jurors are in a case that's like so major? Like, how do they do that?
Well, jury questionnaires of this type, that's not necessarily a matter of public record.
Okay, okay,
And and I know, in trials that, that once the questionnaires, they're usually shredded, at least in, the cases that I've been in, so you would not know. Now, sketch artists can sketch, obviously, jurors, they can sketch, anybody there. And the jurors, usually have a certain entrance that they come in. So, you know, the public may not know, that,
okay,
that
okay, okay,
usually
okay.
there's a certain entrance and exit in the courtroom, in these court buildings and everything. And so, unless somebody is, let's say on the street and then you go into the courtroom and then you're trying to find out where the jurors, you probably would not know. They don't have bags on their heads or something like that, but they don't generally, their cases this big, sometimes they will have a separate entrance to come in, because of course they want to make sure that they are not accosted, and the security is usually pretty tight, especially the bigger profile of cases, the more security, and they take security measures into consideration, for the jurors.
Excellent. All right, thank you, sir. We want to know, one of the tactics seems to be like another form. People in the comments saying like a slut shame, bringing up people's past to try to smear discredit the witnesses. Do you think that a person's past should matter if they're accusing somebody of something, or should it just be case by case?
Well, the answer would be both, because you know when you bring up a person's past, you're bringing up, that is the person credible. In other
Mm,
words,
mm,
is the person, trustworthy? Is the person telling the truth? Now, that being said, just because somebody may have, let's say, criminal record or something like that, does not mean that that person cannot also, at some point become a victim. The problem is, again, going again to, prejudices,
mm, mm,
that, as I'm representing a young man down here is accused of a crime. Well, I got a call from the district attorney's office that, that he now has filed a claim. And so now he's a victim of another crime.
mm,
So, or of a crime. And so the thing is now that, now I'm not representing, that part, but the thing is that, yeah, you want to know, because again, you're looking at attempting to ascertain whether the person is a credible witness, if the person, might be fabricating. But in truth, I want to seek the truth. But the person's past will come up, which it should not,
mm,
if indeed the person, let's say, is a victim. Heck, it's like, just because, let's suppose I, rob people and I have a slew of convictions for robbery or assault, whatever the situation is. Now I get assaulted. That doesn't give somebody a green light now to assault and rob me. Suppose I did
mm,
this 10, 15, 20 years ago, and now I'm the victim. Well, now because I've been robbed, now the person who robbed me gets a pass.
mm. Okay,
See,
okay.
it doesn't make it right. But it goes into, determining whether or not I'm telling the truth of being a victim, you know. And again, it goes back to then a juror has to then determine that, okay, is Athil, because of his past, it's like that boy who cried wolf sort of thing.
Mm,
And it should not matter because, hey, a victim can be a victim of a crime, can be a victim of a crime no matter, what he or she has done in the past. And so, you know, even as I was saying, to someone earlier, let's say somebody is accused, a young lady, let's say, is a victim of sexual assault or rape, in certain jurisdictions, it would be called. Well, if she was. The fact, let's say, that she may have, worn a mini skirt or whatever, does not give somebody a right to sexually assault her. Now, people may look at it and say, well, she caused this on herself.
mm,
Well, I have a problem with that again because just because that's how you, let's say, would dress or something, that does not give somebody a right to take advantage, you know. And I recall, that one of the situation I was dealing with about 15 years ago, a young man was, I was representing this young man who was accused of what they call down here aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. And in English, that just straight up meant that he shot somebody.
mm, mm.
Well, and the young man he shot was paralyzed. And so now, as me being, a Muslim lawyer, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan termed me when I was in law school,
Yes, sir.
he said, when I remember one day, in fact, it was your dad who had me in the hotel room. I had taken Brother Sultan's place one time when the minister we was on break from, I think when it was the semester break, and I was in DC, and the minister had come to DC. Brother Sultan didn't come, and your dad, who was the supreme captain at the time, had me in the room, and when the minister had come in, um, your dad, I was Brother Arif who told the minister that I was in law school. And the minister said, well, brother, you will be a Muslim lawyer, not just the lawyer who happens to be Muslim.
Mm,
You'll be a Muslim lawyer because I've been, with our nation now, oh boy, since 82. But the
praise be to
problem that
Allah.
I, was facing was, you know, I'm representing the young man who pulled the trigger. Well, as it turned out, this young man that I was representing, he was one of our brothers and sisters who had come to Houston as a result of the devastation of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. Well, he, was living and in this community, this neighborhood, apartment complex, whatever it was, and he was having beef with another. I guess the other person may have been a Blood or Crip or whatever, and they were constantly, back and forth because I had gone out there, interviewed a number of people who were, knew what was going on, and it just so happened that this particular evening their paths crossed, and my guy just happened to turn around and he saw the other young man, coming out of his waistband with a gun. My guy had a weapon on him. He got off the shot. Well, the problem that I was having then, or would have had was, or had, how then can I represent, this young man? In other words, am I now going to this matter going to trial? The young man now who is paralyzed, he's coming into the courtroom, let's say, in a wheelchair.
Mm,
How now am I going to reconcile that as a Muslim, and one of our attorneys in the nation? How now am I going to be able to say this young man got what he deserved?
mm,
No, I had a problem with that. And I had to, and because now as an attorney, we are to zealously represent, the persons, our clients, what have you. But the flip side is now that's where, the Islam comes in, the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan come in. How now am I going to be able to reconcile that? Well, as it turned out, by Allah's grace and permission, Allah intervened. We This case had gone on for about 2.5 years. What I mean by that is the young man that I was representing was in the Harris County, Texas jail about 2.5 years awaiting trial. It was nothing on me. It was not nothing on the district attorney, nothing on the judge. But what happened was, going right back now to how we began this podcast, going to it was dealing with the jury process
mm,
that we had questioned 64 jurors,
mm,
and we only needed 12. The first time, we could not seat 12 out of 65 because the question that I asked was, can, as a juror, if you all were to find him a person, that's what I said, because we were not, we couldn't tell, could not talk about trial because you can't talk about that during voir dire or, the jury questioning process. But the question was, if a person is convicted of a gun crime and an aggravated assault, can you consider putting that person on probation? And no one and everyone said they could not. Well,
mm,
then all of those persons were excused for cause because that is the law. The law, and this is key.
mm,
The law does not say, can you give the person probation? The law is that you can consider.
mm,
But now they said they wouldn't even consider it. So they cannot follow the law. And so what wound up happening was, that I guess, well, the phrase was that I busted the jury panel.
mm,
So
mm,
what wound up happening was the case had to be reset. And so it was reset for another couple of months. The same thing happened again.
mm,
Now, this young man was now in the Harris County Jail for 2.5 years. And on the third time, the district attorney then said they wanted initially, he was facing 20 years because, it was a second degree felony down here and he was facing 20 years. And so the district attorney then finally said, look, would, the young man agreed to what's called time served. Now, as an attorney, we have to, tell the person we're representing in a criminal accusation, what, the offer is, I guess the plea offer is. And the young man, he said, yes, I would. I'll go ahead and do that. And I explained to him that that's never going to come off your record. And he was okay with it because he figured that I've already been in jail here for 2.5 years. It was self-defense. That was our argument. And, of course, I could not tell him, no, brother, you can't do that. You have to go to trial on it.
mm,
That
mm,
was, his decision. And I did, explain, the pros and cons of it all. And as it turned out, that's how I was saying it worked out in a favor that I did not have to, have the young man who was paralyzed come into court. That's why I was saying where I believe that Allah intervened and, worked it out so that, this, that I was not put in that position. And I was ready. I was not going to, put that young man who was paralyzed as now the victim that he got what he deserved. I guess people who know me and know me since I've been practicing, I'm not like that. I don't, do that. And because I just don't believe the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan would want me, as one of our nation's attorneys to do that. And I just don't. And so what winds up happening is, you know, you are faced with those things, at least I was. And I think this is where, because this is what I do for, this is my life. And I don't look at it as a job, because sometimes, people can be, a district attorney or prosecuting attorney, a United States attorney, and then they change careers. Now they're representing people who are accused of crimes. Well,
Mhm.
I you choose whatever career path you do, but I just don't, because you just don't look at the facts differently because it depends upon, who it is that, might be signing your paychecks, you know. And so you're faced with those sorts of things, but even the attorney, at least from my perspective, has to have, his own, morals and values coming in. And I think that's how the minister would say, look, God's law versus man's law, and he wants people around him who, are subscribe to God's law, and I hope that I'll continue to do that. I hope I do it, now, and I hope by Allah's grace and permission that I can continue to do that until the time that that I take my last breath.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you, Attorney Athil, Michael Salone. Everybody showing love. We got three more questions for
Yes,
our
sir.
attorney. Just got a quick questions. Follow up with the minister. Okay, so there's a clip once from Savior's Day where the minister is dealing with uh, what should happen if someone attacks one of our sisters. And he was saying, dealing with sexual assault, and he's saying, just like a good Irish would, and this would, you go to the court and we handle Islamic law, Sharia, basically, for anybody who deals with our sisters. So how do we then, like on social media, is a big divide. I know you're dealing with law stuff, but it's a big divide in the house. On one hand, you got some people saying, respect and protect the black woman, we are against that. And on the other hand, you're saying, he's a celebrity, so how would you handle that division online when you see that discourse?
Well, are you meaning, if one of our sisters had been, let's say, the victim?
Yes, sir. First, because you know what I'm
Well,
saying? Because I'm saying, like,
uh,
you'll be surprised at these comments. These people saying it could be their own. For Diddy, it don't matter. Like, if he's innocent and any black, I'm like, y'all, come on, let's let the court,
well,
let's let it play out.
well, well, I'm gonna say this to that. I may have to take the Fifth Amendment, plead the Fifth Amendment on that one, brother, because as an FOI,
Yes, sir.
that's all I'm gonna say.
That's
In
well,
that
same
regard,
thing. I
look,
thought everybody was on the
as
same
an
page, but apparently not.
FOI, you know, because I'm just gonna say as an FOI.
Praise be to
And I mean,
Allah.
as the minister says too, look, be honest with you, look, I don't know if his sister had been accosted if the person who accosted her would live to tell it, to
Wow,
tell
wow,
the
wow.
story. Because
Beautiful.
the way that our, beautiful sisters in the nation are
Yes,
trained,
sir.
you know, please, you know, and
Beautiful.
please, you know,
Okay.
and again, as an FOI, that's we, and as you're saying that, Joshua, brother Joshua, I'm just seeing, just various sisters just coming in my mind now, you know, and I'm saying, hey, if that happened to her, or it's like also, a father, a husband, it what was that movie? Oh dear, Samuel L. Jackson was in it. It was one of those
A time to
John.
kill. A time to kill.
Yes, 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 yes. Now that's where now, where the rubber meets the road,
Wow.
you know, but in Islam, and particularly our Nation of Islam community, wherefore I in MGT, and we know what
Yes,
to do.
sir. Beautiful. Praise be to Allah. People bear witness. Thank you, Sister Naima. Fruit 10, somebody's in the comments. All right. It was going deep. Okay. Yes, sir. I wanted to ask you speaking of the FYNGT and some of the golden times of our nation's history, could you let us know one of your favorite memories of like Dope Busters and all of the that time period? Because we're children and young, but the new generation needs to know some of the sacrifices that you all made. First of all, we salute you, Brother
Thank
Athil, for all of the sacrifices that you've made in your family, and we love you. But for the work that you all did in Washington, D.C., and of course your whole life,
you. Yes, sir.
primarily in those early years when we just remember Brother Athil always having a briefcase, being a businessman, suave, handling things, And now we're very proud. We want you to know the People's Podcast, myself, my
Thank you.
family, the Bruno audience are proud that we get to know you and say that you are one of the best attorneys in the world and that you are a family friend and my mother loves you and of course my father, everybody. But anytime I think about come join the Dope Busters and seeing all the table, always see Brother Phil, Sister Nisa, and all of that, good stuff. Walking on the video, a young Haki, and
Yes, sir.
but what's one of your favorite memories of the Dope Busters time period, Brother Phil?
Um, I would say, brother, it was probably when the minister came to Mayfair.
Okay, okay.
Um, and because I was talking to another friend the other day about this in a different way, and because we were talking about, how we give our lives for him. And I remember now people who know me, I'm no martial artist and stuff. I mean, I'm not. I've worked out a couple of times with Brother Aziz, and I say a couple of times, maybe five, and I'm not, no. But I remember when he was at Mayfair, that I was fortunate enough to be right near him.
Mm.
Um, and you know, ready to take a bullet for him. And I'm not trying to, because hell, that's probably all I could do. You
Mm.
know, you know, jump in front of him if something happened. And, and that was back in 88.
Mm.
Fast forward now to 2025, we were fortunate enough to be with him at his table a few weeks ago, not for his birthday celebration. I was not, fortunate to make it there, but a couple of days before then. And I was thinking that same thing that, wow, fast forwarding all that time. And Josh, Brother Joshua, when you say, what is my favorite memory? At Savior's Day, this past Savior's Day, I was talking with Brother Rashad, eating,
Yes,
Brother
sir.
Rashad and his wife, his lovely wife, Sister Erica. And Brother Rashad asked me, he said, Athil, did you ever think back then, because it was right on the heels of what Minister Ishmael had stated during his words to us. And he asked me, Brother Rashad asked me, did I ever think that I would, still be here and be in the position, still serving? And so this is an interesting way to answer your question or give another answer to your question. What is my favorite moment from that would be where I am now.
Mm.
Because had it not been for, us going into Mayfair and me knowing, because, when we went into Mayfair, in 1988, your dad was our regional captain at the time. And we, what we did there, made international news.
Yes, sir.
And it was, that there were so many believers from the Mid-Atlantic region, particularly Washington and Baltimore, who had ascended to different posts within our nation. Your dad eventually became the Supreme Captain. Captain Athil became, he was in Baltimore at the time, he became the regional captain. Brother Alfred, Captain Alfred became the captain down in Richmond. We
Mm,
had several brothers. Dr. Alim was able to open up a clinic. So all Brother Naba, was moved to Chicago. Brother Arif, all of that. And so had I not been in that situation, at Mayfair at the time, and knowing your dad, knowing Brother Al Najim, formerly Brother Dion, who also became the Mid-Atlantic Regional Captain, Sister Najima, your mom, who was the Vanguard Captain, all out of DC and the Mid-Atlantic region because in part and in large part to what we did at Mayfair, that I would not be in a position that I am in, now being one of our attorneys in the nation. So that, when I can look at it from that perspective, then, that I would not have been, and I don't believe I would be in that position. Yeah, I'd probably still be an attorney. I'm pretty sure of that since I'd wanted to do that since I was 8. But being, and just like how Brother Rashad asked the question, you know, did I see myself, you know, you know, in 2025, being at, and I would say that would be the progression of it all, would
mm,
be the favorite moment. Oh, it was tense, and I'm not, I'm not, I guess you know me, Brother Joshua. I don't, pretend to say, certain things and say, stick out my chest. Heck, I was 135 pounds then, and probably about 150 pounds now. But it was tense, you know. But and I remember, one of the days that we were in the command post at Mayfair, um, and the police came in. In fact, it
mm,
may have been that same day. I'm not 100% certain. Your dad may remember. Your dad would remember, not may remember. The police were on ones. They drew guns, and we were in. The command post for your for the viewers was an apartment at Mayfair. The police had their, I don't know, maybe about 10 or 15 police officers. Their they had their guns drawn. In fact, it had to be that same day. That's right. And the brothers, we were lined up on, in ranks. Well, I just happened to be in the middle with the police with the guns and the brothers behind us. And Brother Anthony, that some believers know him as Secret Squirrel, he
mm.
was in the
Okay, okay.
middle. And the brothers just started Allahu Akbar, sounding the alarm. Now I'm in the middle. So I'm like, okay, if these officers should trip, and I say that, trip, the first bullet is mine. I'm going to be,
Mm,
because I'm right in the middle. Now we had Brother Leroy, uh, you know, I mean, killers, in martial arts. Brother Amin, who I had seen one day, just, we had an FOI martial arts exhibition. Well, the martial arts exhibition wasn't only the FOI back in 88. Or no, 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 it was before 88, where he broke a cinder block with his head. I'm like, okay, I'm glad I'm on your side. Bottom line is, I'm in the middle. So yeah, that was tense, brother. I don't know if I'd still be here, had stuff not gone. But your dad was out actually outside meeting with boy, the assistant chief. I forget his name. The minister had given him a holy name, brother Hamza. I
mm,
forget his name. Just escaped me just that quick. But he came back inside because
mm.
your dad is meeting with the assistant chief of the DC Metropolitan Police, and he hears this. He comes upstairs and everything was quelled. But you know that was one of those moments where I was like, okay, hey, this is life and death now,
Allahu
because
Akbar.
trigger happy. But but now going to the whole answer of the question is, that whole experience has enabled me, to be able to be where I am, today. And fast forwarding, and I say this, Brother Joshua, that you know, it was your dad, man. Your
Mm, mm.
dad,
Praise be to God.
encouraged. Your dad, made sure that, when I was here, because I went, I came down here for law school, down here to Houston, and your father and brother Najim and brother Troy made sure that, that I, continued, that I, to be on the payroll so that I could pay the tuition, so that I could pay the living expenses to be able to do, what it is that I'm doing now, and so my favorite experience is being a member of the Dope Busters so that I now can do what it is that I'm doing now by way of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, our nation, and our community. And I, I'm not the best at what at people. I mean, I'm not. But you know, I try. You know, and and again, brother, I know your dad is getting better and better, but I cannot escape, and I pray to Allah that I never, ever, you know, fail or fall short of giving your dad the credit. I know he was our captain, our regional captain, our supreme captain. But he's more than that, just a wonderful friend. And brother, and I'm not saying this because you're on the podcast, and
Yes,
just
sir.
like your mom, you know, you know, there are very few days, brother, that Sister Sharifa does not pass my mind.
Praise be to
You know,
God.
the family. I know that you look at all these TV shows, people say, but that's how we were, brother. You
Yes,
were a
sir.
little younger, but that's how we were. That's why, and I was able to do so many things going around, like, on those occasions when the minister was doing a lot of his, lectures and everything. I was able to go to so many cities. And I think that also has enabled me when I'm at Savers, they'll go into some cities or something, that believers will look at me and say, "Oh, Brother Athil," because I was exposed to a lot because
Mm.
of your dad, because
Praise
of
be
what
to God.
what we were able to do at Mayfair and Paradise uh, um, uh, Manor, the adjoining complex, the Dope Busters back in '88 and beyond.
Praise be to God. Beautiful, brother. Beautiful. And people are bearing witness and showing love all around the world. Our brother Ian says his name is Lau Duckett. And
Yes,
now
thank you, brother. Thank
now
you, thank
known
you,
as Brother
thank you.
Hamza. Thank you, Brother
Right,
Ian, for
thank you,
your luxury auto concierge,
thank you.
always holding it down. One of the best brothers I know out of Muhammad Muslim before, and always representing for GoGo and all the DC stuff. But Theo, can we put you on the hot seat? We got two more questions. Got to put you on the hot seat. When you come back again, to talk about some more stuff dealing with Diddy, and then some more of your
Brother,
life.
Josh, of course, brother.
Praise be to God.
I would love to. If I'm saying anything, and maybe some, if people want to hear anything, I don't know. He may say, okay, it's just a lawyer, somebody just talking. We don't want to hear him. But if I welcome the opportunity, thank you.
Yes, sir, brother Phil. And I believe I speak for my siblings on this point. Outside of my father, I will say, and my aunt Jamila, you were my mother's best friend for sure. Know
Well,
that.
thank you,
Just
brother.
know it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And since everything my mom's, you have. I always tell everybody, you brother Phil is the most consistent person in my life out of my mother's people. You ain't there. You ain't nothing changed. You call me all. I'm like, brother Phil, hey, can we talk to
Yes,
you?
sir.
So that matters to me
Yes,
and that
sir.
matters to my family. So we thank you and
Yes,
love
sir.
you for that, for always calling. And
Thank you.
it would not be a day, it would not be a week that would go by that my mom's like, I'm talking to Athil, I'm talking to Athil. He
Right.
said, I'm talking to Athil.
Josh, your mom, it's so interesting that yeah, I would talk with your mom and, you know, the conversations that we would, it was just real,
Yes, sir.
and, so funny because, just how I guess people, believers look at me in the nation and, that I could talk to your mom and your dad is right there, and you know, and it's has nothing to do with anything, you know, odd or something,
Praise be to Allah.
and
Yes, sir.
and I can go to brother Eric out in Phoenix and his wife, sister Kamala,
Yes, sir. Yes,
you
sir.
know, I'll spend time with them. In fact, I remember I was out there in Phoenix a couple of years ago. And me, I'm being honest. I know people say prayer is better than sleep. Again, full disclosure, they're reading the Quran in the morning and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I get up around 7, 8 o'clock. They're already done. And Captain Eric leaves,
Mm.
and he leaves me there with his wife. And I remember, that one year, it was around, it was in November, around Thanksgiving. Brother Troy and I, is when y'all had, it first moved, or it was around the time that y'all were in Chicago. And Brother Troy and I, we flew up and we spent the weekend. And your dad, he don't mess around, bro. We're like, we're thinking, okay, well, we get up, it's Friday after Thanksgiving. We're like, okay, we'll get up, we'll get to the mosque. We come downstairs, and your mom says, "Oh, Brother Sharif is gone." Like, where the heck did he go? He's at the mosque already. The point was that they're leaving, though, us with the family.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that's where that whole trust and everything, and the love comes in. So my point is that when I would talk with your mom, your dad is there on the phone, I hear him in the background, and we're having a conversation. We're talking, and we're talking about your dad. It's like, and I'm asking your mom, I would always ask her, how's brother Sharif? Oh, he's okay, but he doesn't. I'm like, but Sharif, said Sharif, can you tell him to get on, the exercise? He will. I'll tell him, but he's not going to do it, you know. But those are the conversations that we would have, and even brother, when even when your mom, was suffering, you know, and I would get a chance to talk with her, brother, even your dad the same way. You never would know if you didn't know, you would not know that, that their health, or that her health, that, you know, and your dad is. I'm on top of it. Even when your dad and I talked a few weeks ago or was about a week ago for his birthday.
Yes, sir.
I'm on top of the world. Everybody knows that. Me, on the other hand, I don't know, brother.
Mm.
And if I have that spirit, I don't think I'd go, woe is me, but that spirit of, the embodiment of what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has instilled in us, that
Praise.
in spite or despite what we're going through, you know, you would not know it. Now, me on the other, you might know it. Or I might try to mask it, but I'm not going to be able to, muster the strength and the courage to be able to articulate it the way that your mom did and the way that your dad does.
Praise be to
You
Allah.
know, and I just thank Allah, brother, for me getting the opportunity to, having, having known your mom and your dad. And I didn't know. I mean, just I never really knew that. I know when we were, there for your mother's services, sister, oh dear, Nuseba, when she saw me, she said that, that you were, she said, Athil, you were one of Sister Sharifa's favorites. And that really, touched me.
Mm.
It did. I, you know, and I had, it's, and again, brother, just, really just, I look at it too, just welcoming me, because who am I, and to, but, for even you and your siblings in particular, and especially your dad and your mom, even to just welcome me, and, you know, um, I'm just, and that Sister Sharif and Brother Sharif, I mean,
Praise be to Allah.
uh,
Your brother Phil, my sister Naima says, definitely one of mommy's best friends, and we love you,
thank
brother
you.
Phil, and
Thank you.
everybody showing love all around the world. Okay, last two questions for you, brother Phil.
Sure.
Everybody, stay tuned. We'll let you know. We'll be doing some updates about the Diddy trial moving forward within our esteemed attorney, brother Athil Muhammad. I wanted to ask you on a very serious note, what's going on with the Cowboys and the Lakers? How are you from DC? And you're the biggest Dallas Cowboy fan I know, as well as the biggest Lakers fan I know.
Well, being a Cowboy fan, in fact, some of my line brothers, and some of the attorneys, in our nation know that, and I'm looking at the calendar now, I gotta go soon. But they know that I'm a two-sport star. I know Deion
Okay,
Sanders, and Bo
Bo Jackson.
Jackson, but they ain't got nothing on me, man. You know, um, the difficult thing was, that, trying to juggle the law practice, and playing with the Lakers and the
The
Cowboys. And I know they're
Cowboys, yes,
like, okay, 60 plus, but I mean, hey, it is what it is. I
it
mean,
is what it is.
OTAs are beginning soon. And the good thing is that, well, I mean, I was kind of disappointed, that, we weren't able to beat Minnesota, but that gave me little time to heal and be able to, attend, the OTAs. As my line brothers will tell you, I'm a two-sport star
Yes,
at
sir.
61,
Yes, sir.
And look, and brother Michael Muhammad, our attorney in Dallas, and brother Warren are one of the other attorneys down there. They say, okay, well, I'm a two-sport star. I look at two sports on TV. But my line brothers would tell you, brother, they're like, oh, here goes Buzz again, man, talking about him playing and him being on the roster of the Lakers
Yes,
and the
sir.
Cowboys. But no, what happened, sir, is that, growing up in New York, and people would expect, and my brother, Cedric is a huge
Giants
Giant
fan.
fan. But I back in the early 70s, and it still comes on today, I guess, NFL films, they would have the replays of, half-hour replay excerpts, if you will, of the Super Bowl. And what happened was this: when I was, young, I saw a replay or on the NFL films thing. It wasn't the whole game of Super Bowl five, when Dallas played the Baltimore Colts,
Okay,
and
okay,
Dallas lost. I was so hurt by that. I felt so bad. You know, that's when I became a Cowboy fan. That was the first time
okay.
I'd ever seen football that I recall. And that's what I saw. And we lost that Super Bowl. Again, I say we, lost that Super Bowl 16-13. I think it was Bob Lilly they showed him, he throws his helmet up in the air and everything. And I was so, I'm a youngster, and I was so hurt by that. I said, man, I felt so bad for that team. They became my favorite. And
Okay.
it wasn't all that moniker, America's team and all that stuff. That wasn't it. It was because of then. And now with the Lakers, I was a huge New York Knicks fan. That was the only New York team growing up that I, watched. In baseball, I was a Los Angeles Dodgers fan,
Okay.
and still am to this day. But I don't play with the Dodgers though. I don't play with the Dodgers, and
You're that
you
three
know,
sports. You're that three-sport
yeah,
athlete.
well,
Okay.
yeah, and they asking me though. I'm like, okay, I'd be the first three-sport athlete, but but what happened was I was a huge Walt Frazier fan.
Okay.
Um, And
Clyde the
when the
Glide.
Knicks, there you go. And when the Knicks traded him to the Cleveland Cavaliers, that's when and because I didn't understand the business of it all, I'm a child. And the Lakers were my second favorite team. And that's how the Lakers then ascended from number two to to become my favorite team. But
Mm.
I still, and with Walt Frazier, he was the spokesperson. I guess that's what they call spokesman. His shoe was the Pumas, and that
Okay.
was my favorite sneakers. And and it's interesting, Josh. It took me all this time. It was, I think, my 58th or 59th birthday that I finally bought and was able to get a pair of Pumas.
Okay.
And I got them now, and I actually I don't wear them that much, but so yeah, that's just that's a little segue there. But but I do wear the Pumas, when I suit up, when the Lakers, and I'll be wearing them, for training camp when training camp rolls around again, you know. I do say though, but Luca, we didn't need him, but I mean,
Because they
I
got
wasn't
good,
in.
good thing.
I wasn't in, those discussions and everything. They didn't consult me,
Yes, sir. Yes,
but
sir. Brother Phil, I have one quick point before we let everyone
Sure.
go and let you go, Brother
Yes,
Phil.
sir.
I was reaching out to someone. I was going to interview him. His name is Jeff Pearlman. He wrote the book Showtime about the
Okay.
Lakers that later became the miniseries Winning Time. And
Yeah,
so we were going back and forth because I want to interview him,
sure.
and because I was waiting for him to do the the one about Shaq and Kobe.
Okay.
I really wanted to see because those Lakers, those are my. I wasn't a fan at all. I was a
Yes, sir.
Spurs fan, and they were, they were rivals.
Sure.
But I didn't know if you got a chance to see that television series, Winning Time. It's very good.
Well, Josh, about then, see, the problem I have with the winning time, I have no idea, brother. Every time that and I haven't seen many of the shows. Yeah, I've maybe seen a few of them.
yes, sir.
I'm like, they edited your brother out. I'm like, where am I?
You got to see
They
it,
gave
brother.
me
Phil.
no love, brother.
No love. Matter of fact, I'm gonna check him on that. I'm gonna say,
Yeah,
hey, you know what I'm
yeah,
saying? You ain't gotta worry about that.
yeah. We're done. No love, no, no.
Yeah, I worry about that. But listen, but
Yes,
I
sir.
feel we love you,
Thank you.
and some people are showing you love. Can't wait to upload this
Thank
to
you.
YouTube. Inshallah, we will speak soon.
Thank you.
May Allah continue to bless you and your
I hope you
family.
will.
Yes, sir. This
And thank you so very much, Brother Joshua, from the bottom of my heart, brother. May Allah, just, continue to shower you with love and protection. And, your dad and your whole family with love and protection, brother. And, Allah willing and spare my life, we will look to speak soon. And, I thank you so very much, sir, for the opportunity. Be safe and well. And Allah willing, as I said, we'll look to speak soon. Thank you so much. And to the viewers, thank you very much for, allowing me to be in your living room or wherever you're watching this podcast. And hopefully I said one or two things that, was that resonated, that made sense. And I hope I didn't say anything that would have offended anybody. We're just trying. We're just trying. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. This is Joshua Leonard Muhammad signing off for the People's Podcast. Assalamu alaikum.